goes on.
Passion, something, taboos.
Codes of behaviour. Are you filming now? Codes of behaviour are incredibly different here compared to in England, and this can be quite difficult, you know, because it's a culture shock for somebody coming from outside. I noticed people seem very concerned about how they look and how they appear to other people, and I find that sometimes I find quite annoying and quite limiting. And then when you go back to England for a week and you go to a do and you look around and you just think, God, no one gives a toss about any of that anymore. But maybe they would have done 20, 30 years ago. It really mattered, you know, what width their trousers were, if they were a Northern Soul guy, or, you know, what shirt they were wearing. It used to matter more then, or, you know, the mods were really sort of narcissistic and stuff then. I mean, the mod thing comes from England, so, you know, it's a narcissistic thing. But here they're still on all that tip, you know, and they're really obsessive about wearing smart suits and stuff like that, stuff that basically isn't good to dance in. And the young guys that do the acrobatics, they're struggling because they've got really tight jeans and they're wearing the wrong gear for it, really, I think.
I like that.
The mod thing, really, are we filming this or not? I mean, the mod thing, I've never really been connected with that myself, personally. I came to Northern Soul by going to events in the north of England in the mid to late 80s, and you went to an event and there weren't any mods there usually. It was just people who were into the music, and they would just wear contemporary fashions. You know, when I went in the mid 80s, people were wearing what they call peg trousers, you know, the sort that are baggy up top, but then they taper in and quite narrow at the bottom. And they're not all that flattering, actually. They're good at hiding a beer belly, maybe so useful for some. But those fashions were in, and t-shirts and things like that. And even if you look at the classic Northern Soul era, the footage of Wigan and stuff like that, this is not a mod culture. It was kind of narcissistic. It did have its own fashion, but it wasn't mod. It was about what was comfortable to move in, and it related to the fashion at that time, which was all about big baggy trousers and tank tops and quite almost effeminate hairdos sometimes. That's what was in fashion. And when I went to do's in the north of England, it was very relaxed like that. You didn't have to belong to a scene. It wasn't, you know, a fashion scene. It wasn't cliquey. Most of the people that went to these do's were from very ordinary working class backgrounds, very working class, coal miners, things like that. You know, people with jobs that don't exist anymore. There were a lot of coal miners went to the do's in Yorkshire, and they would dress like they were going out on a Saturday night. There were no pretensions, and that's kind of what it was like at Wigan. I think you have to go back a lot before that to find genuine mod styles, you know, at all-nighters, probably Twisted Wheel or, you know, The Torch and things like that, which is ancient history. I wasn't around in those days. Mm-hmm. There's a generation of mods, younger mods, that get to have their own do's, and then it's exactly, that's what's important, you know. But it's not the northern scene, it's separate. Do you know a dude called Crossfire? Crossfire. It's an all-nighter in London, and it's got one room that's all like mod scene, and the other room that's Northern Soul scene, and they're completely separate. And the people that go to the mod thing, they're all younger, and they're all in their smart suits and everything, and most of them can't dance for toffee, you know. But what matters is what they look like. And then you go into the next room, and it's nothing to do with that. You've got people just dressed in what they feel comfortable, and they're about 20 years older, or more, 30, 40, 50. And they're just there for the music and the dancing. They don't care anymore about what people think of their appearance. Maybe they would have done 10, 20 years ago, but not anymore. In Britain, in Britain, there are people, for example, that go to Northern Do's now that would have been a mod maybe in the 1980s, and they would have dressed all smart and worried about their appearance in the same way that maybe the Vienna mods do now. But now, it's like 20 years later, and they kind of got seduced into that more sort of Northern Soul culture that's completely about the music and the dancing and not, relaxing about what you're wearing. It's not like they don't care. They're just not so rigidly into that mod ethic anymore, even the ones that used to be mods. But there are also young mods in Britain in their 20s and 30s who probably would socialise with the mods here actually and go to their do's and vice versa. And they are more like that earlier kind of mod that, was really always wearing the suits and worried about their appearance. So I think in some ways the do's in Vienna are maybe a bit like how it would have been in London in the early 80s. In London in the early 80s, the northern scene was different to how it was in the north of England. I went back to London from the north of England in 1987, and I started going to Northern Do's in London, and it was very different. You go to a do at the 100 Club, and there were a lot of people from a mod background and wearing the suits and all that. And the music, it was more elitist. People hung around in little cliques. Oh, we're going to talk to you, but we ain't going to talk to you, and all this crap. And the records had to be extremely rare and extremely expensive. And preferably stuff that nobody had heard. And the more rare and the more obscure, the more kudos the DJ got. And they kind of lost sight of what the music actually sounded like and whether the record was good or not. They kind of lost sight of that, and it was very narcissistic. The Vienna scene now is a bit like that in that it's got that mix of mods and other people. So it's a bit like London in the 1980s, but it's much more relaxed with the music. And Jörg plays a really nice selection of music, across different genres and different styles of soul music, which you wouldn't have had at the 100 Club in 1986. It was really kind of hardcore, what we would call 60s newies. And these were mainly mid-tempo records. They didn't have breaks. They were really climpy-clompy, sort of basic R&B sounds. They sounded like they came from West Side Story. It wasn't what you would think of as Northern Soul. Completely different to what I heard in the north of England, which was classic Northern Soul dance music. Yeah.
Stuff. What was your... you were talking
about... How I got involved?
What was the initial reason?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, yes. When I was 18, I went to West Yorkshire to go to college. I began a degree, I'll start again, this is already too long. I went to college in Yorkshire. I got interested in physical theatre. I got fit. At the same time as that, in my spare time, I got interested in music and dancing to music with a bunch of friends, and we took over the college disco. We started playing James Brown records, mixing it in with the more palatable records that were in the charts at that time. And then a friend of mine called Paul Sado arrived at the college a year after me, and he started talking about Northern Soul. And when I mentioned that I liked Motown and Stax records, he said, well, actually, there's a whole load more of that stuff that you probably don't know. And he started putting in these Northern Soul records. And we started to mix those in with the James Brown and the other funk records, and it just seemed to work. he told me about the Northern Soul scene. He thought it was finished because Wigan had closed. He didn't know about the back page of Echoes. And then one day, a mate of his took him to a Northern Soul do again after a break of 6 or 7 years, and he got into it again. And so he introduced me to it. It was Paul that arranged for me to meet him at the all-nighter at Morecambe.
Short enough. Can we use even much shorter? Huh?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay. Which are the most important points you want me to put in?
When it was?
Okay. Yeah. When it was, whom, the reason I liked it.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
When it was, whom, the reason I liked it. When it was, whom, the reason I liked
where?
it. Okay.
Where?
And where? Mm-hmm. When it was, where, the reason I liked it. Okay, I'll try.
Half a sentence.
Okay. Okay.
Quarter sentence. Okay.
In 1982, I went to college in West Yorkshire in the north of England. I got interested in physical theatre as well as visual art. I started to take an interest in music and dancing. With a bunch of friends, we took over the college disco. A man called Paul Sado arrived and enjoyed the funk records we were playing, but started to introduce Northern Soul records. I knew about Stax and Motown. I didn't know about this thing called Northern Soul. What I liked about it was that it had an energy and a rawness that you couldn't get from contemporary music at that time, you know. I mean, Spandau Ballet, come on, you know, it's overproduced, overcontrived, no authenticity, you know. This was the opposite to that. Paul Sado brought it to us, and he took me to my first all-nighter at Morecambe. He used to go as a really young teenager, 14 years old. He gave it up for some years because it was a bit dangerous, and then kind of got back into it, really because of the renewal in interest in that music that we brought to him. It was dangerous for Paul because, as you know, there's a big drug culture within Northern Soul. And Paul was a young teenager, rebelling against his parents. His mates invited him to Northern Do's. He used to climb out of the bedroom window with his kit bag without their permission and go off with some mates to Northern Do's. He used to go to St Ives, to Wigan, to all sorts of places, 14 years old. And he was introduced to amphetamine drugs of various kinds. And it was a lifestyle of complete excess. And it was, you know, it was involved with criminal aspects. And I mean, Paul is a character that he's attracted to the dark side anyway. If you go to a do with Paul, Northern Soul or anything, he always seems to meet the people who are a bit shady and dodgy, you know, and he seems attracted to that. And he just got into trouble with it, you know. He ended up in hospital with diabetes, because of this drug.
If you could do it.
If I could
Yeah,
change anything. Okay, let me have a think. I think, yes. I think it would be nice if we could have more regular events. Jorg is already quite adventurous about the range of music he plays, but I think he could be even more adventurous, and he could branch out into funk, into jazz. We or somebody should work hard to get a new audience for the music. A new dancing audience. A lot of the time, if you go to Otto Wagner, you'll have like 5 or 6 people that are really sort of into it, like a little core of people that love the music and that dance in an aware way, you know, with some love about what they're doing. and also with some awareness of other people. But most people that go down there, they have only a very superficial link with the music, which is fine, but they just go, what they tend to do is get completely pissed, and then they stumble around on the dance floor and bump into you, and there's no respect, you know. I think for it to really take off, you would have to work hard on finding an appreciative audience who are going to listen and going to enjoy and dance to that music. But you mustn't just do traditional Northern Soul. You've got to go into funk. You've got to go into some house music. You know, it's got to be quite broad.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps you could repeat this in half a sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which points?
The point, what you would like to change about the soul scene, that there are more appreciating and sensitive dancers.
Okay. More events.
Mm-hmm.
If I could change the northern dance scene in Vienna, I would have more events, more regularly, so that there's something to go to every week. I would work very hard on making a new audience for the music. I would increase the range of music played even more, so that it's not just traditional 60s Northern Soul and R&B. I would make links into funk music, links into house music, links into jazz music, and say, hey, this stuff is all related, it's all part of the same story, and we need to appreciate it in that way, and we want to dance to all of this stuff, you know. At the moment, it's reliant on a floating audience of people that are going for a late drink, and they're stumbling all over the dance floor. There's no respect, there's no understanding of the music. There's only a small core of people that are really enjoying the music and dancing to it in a sort of meaningful way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. The first thing that I would import from Vienna to the English soul scene and the English dance club scene generally are the relaxed licensing hours. It doesn't make people less alcoholic to only have the club open till 2 a.m. If they're going to drink a lot, they're going to drink a lot, and you get just as much pissed up wankers in a British club as you do in a Viennese one, generally. But there's something about the relaxed European lifestyle that, you know, you can go out whatever time you want. You can buy a drink if you want, or you can buy a coffee if you want, and you can go out and hear music until the club doesn't have any people in it anymore. You will go on playing till 5 or 6 in the morning if there are people willing to dance, and that's a really nice, relaxed way of doing it rather than having fixed hours. Stop there, because I just want to see if there's anything else that I would import.
Expect the future of the Viennese soul scene.
Well, at the moment, I think the energy and the dynamism of the Viennese soul scene, for better or worse, really comes from one man, and that's Jörg, because he sets up all the do's in Vienna. So really, it's like, if he wasn't doing that, I don't think anything would happen. And sometimes, you know, I mean, no one's perfect, and everyone's got, you know, good things and bad things about them. Sometimes you get a bit annoyed with the way Jörg does things or doesn't do things, but in the end, you know, I take my hat off to him, because he's doing a brilliant job, doing something that wouldn't be there otherwise. Simple as that.
Another question. Imagine that a miracle happened over the night, yeah?
Yeah.
And the miracle then in Vienna, if that miracle comes true, what will be different?
Okay,
in one sentence.
What would be different is that you'd have 2 or 3 venues run by different people doing clubs on different nights, and they would be working together as a cooperation, but also a little bit competitive to see who could get the edge. And they would be playing a variety of music. You might go to one club that has an emphasis on funk and jazz, and then another one that has an emphasis on traditional 60s northern. You would go there and you would see the regulars that have been into this kind of music for years going there, but you would also see new people, and not just pissed up students, but maybe students and other people that are really getting into the music, and they are finding ways of dancing to it. You would get break dancers coming in, you know, from other scenes. You would get, that would refresh the dancing straight away, because they're really kind of focused on acrobatics and clever moves and stuff like that. You would get maybe, I don't know, maybe you get Turkish people coming or something like that, you know. It's like, I think in England, Northern Soul has its roots in working class people. That's not to say that it's blinkered, because I'm not really working class. My parents are teachers, I'm an oddball. And I went to these dues, and people knew I was an oddball. They knew I was a bit mad, but they welcomed me. They didn't ostracise me because I was different, you know what I mean? And that's what it should be like. You shouldn't have to feel like you should dress in this way, or sit in this way, or only talk to this person. That's bollocks. It's for anybody, you know. And in England, working class white people in the north of England, that was the main thing. In London, dance clubs are working class black people and white people, you know. Here I would think the best way to get new people to go around poor housing estates with flyers, advertising, get new people into it, people that aren't pretentious, people that aren't rich or don't think they're a somebody. They just want to go out and have a good time and listen to some good music.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Tell us when you're ready, and in half a sentence.
And look at them.
Yeah?
Okay.
You have to ask me again.
Well, and please answer to their side, but the question was like, because I felt the idea behind the scene is also about keeping the secret, hiding it a little bit and sticking to this tradition and sticking to exactly this music and not broadening in any direction in a way to have this thing that we have in common. It's our own thing and we don't do so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's the point? That's kind of living a lie, because these records were made for the moment. They were made for the present in the 1960s by black American people, for themselves basically, and just by chance their tunes still have resonance now, and they still sound good to us. They're speaking to us, a different set of people in a different generation, because of their quality. But to say that only that is good and that all that came after was somehow a mistake is an awful, life-denying crock of shit, really. No, we have to say, yeah, this is good, but you must always look for things of quality now, or things that were recorded 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, or last week, or it doesn't matter. You know, you want to find the things that are of quality, you want to bring them together, you want to dance to them. That's how it is for me.
Okay.
This is a mistaken and a blinkered way of looking at things.
Can you say what is the mistaken way, because we don't have
Okay, so I think it's a mistake to focus only on some records that were made in a limited period of time in the 1960s and say only that is quality for us and only that has meaning. This is life denying. It's a dead end. You know, it's missing the point of the music. Those records were made in that time for that moment, and they have an energy and a life to them that's almost like a ghost, actually, a strange kind of ghost, that still speaks to us now, today. We're a different bunch of people from a different background, different age group, from the black American people that made those records in the 1960s. But we reach out to them, we connect with them. But to say that we can only do that with those funny records that were made somewhere else in the 1960s and nothing else, this is a complete denial. No, we have to take that same attitude to every music that we hear and have that, take that ear to find sounds of quality that speak to us and dance to them. And it should go across genres. And I think sometimes in earlier times, you know, when these dudes started in the 60s and 70s, they weren't trying to make a retro elitist thing. They were trying to find good records that excited them, that they could dance to. And some of those were made last week, some of them were made 3 years ago, some of them were made 10 years ago. And it's that spirit that we should take, not this retrospective, backward-looking thing.
Mm-hmm. So very good.
Good.
I have a very short last question. Just one more thing that interests me.
Yeah.
A side effect of the scene in Vienna being... I think a very nice side effect of the scene in Vienna being very small, the soul scene, is that...
It's mainly about the music and dancing. I get very frustrated with this fact, but it is a fact. The language barrier is a huge barrier. Even though most people do speak English quite well, you can't get on the inside of any culture or any intellectual thing or any musical thing. You can't really get on the inside if you're not speaking the language that is the normal language for that place. And it makes it socially very limiting for me. And I go to the dues. I mean, obviously I know my partner Lisa, her English is excellent. The language of our relationship is mainly English. And I don't really have much social contact with the other people that go there, to be honest. And I also find it sometimes a little bit oppressive, the fact that everybody knows each other and everybody's watching each other and thinking, oh, he said, she said, and blah, blah. I'm not interested in all that. I'm interested in the music, enjoying the music, and I'm interested in people, but I'm not interested in superficial stuff of what people are wearing or what's going on in their private lives. That's their business. I won't cross those kind of boundaries. And when people cross those boundaries with me, I'm like that. I don't want to know. And there has been times when I have avoided going to the dues in Vienna because it's just been too much, and people gossiping or saying things about your private life or just asking you questions and trying to get information out of you. And like, why? You know, why is it important to them? It certainly didn't help me, you know. So let's just focus on other things, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we just close with the interview right now.
Fine, yeah. Okay. I think this would be easier. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So in my going out dancing bag, we have the following items. If I've got bad hair and need to go to the barber's, I wear a nice hat to cover up my bad hair. I will always go in my ceremonial dancing shoes. These are what I call Apprentice dancing shoes. I bought them about 4 years ago, and they are not quite broken in, but they look lovely and smart. So I like to go to the do in my smartest black shoes, okay? Here we have the favourite dancing trousers. They are a nice shape because they kind of hug my shape very well without making me feel uncomfortable, and they've got nice baggy legs so that I can do the splits and do floor work without pulling any muscles, and they look great. So that's those. Yes, I always go with a variety of dancing shoes, which I'll show you first, I think. Yeah, I'll show you the shirt in a minute. But you never know what the floor's going to be like. Even if you know the venue, they might have polished the floor, or some idiots might have come in with a load of talcum powder and made it like an ice skating rink. So, you need some trainers in case it's too slippy, right? These are really old, knackered old trainers. But generally speaking, the older and more worn out the shoe, the better they are for dancing. So, if the floor is too slippy because of talcum powder or floor polish, then out come the trainers. In daylight, they look like something a tramp wouldn't wear. But in a club with that low light, I'd get away with it. But these are the prize items. These are like the number one dancing shoes, known to my friends in England as Billy's Boots, from a cartoon character who used to score loads of goals, but only when he put these magic boots on. Okay? So these are Billy's